What's your name again? The man behind the steering wheel asked. I don't think it matters much now, does it? I rested my forehead against the window and watched the buildings we were passing by. He adjusted the rearview mirror and stole a covert glance at me. I was just wondering how someone your age ends up in this mess. I sighed and looked down at the handcuffs on my wrist. The metal was cold against my skin. Make a guess, I said. We arrived at a red light. He slowed the car to a halt. His fingers drummed against the steering. I looked into the mirror and showed him my half-rotten yellow teeth to give him a hint. Heroin? He said. Meth, I said. He went quiet. In the flash of passing lights, I caught a glimpse of his graying sideburns and a glint of dandruff on the shoulder of his blue uniform. I wondered if my answer had made him awkward. It was surprising. Usually cops who are much younger than him are a lot more jaded to meth-head teens. Then the lights turned green, he fired the engine and hit the gas again. Are you 15? He asked. 17, I said. I had a daughter your age. I noticed the past tense and paused. I looked out the window again and caught a faint reflection of myself in the light and glass. My left eye was blackened and my right eye looked lifeless to myself. I was curious about the cop's daughter. He probably wanted me to be curious. Or else he wouldn't have worded it like that. I would have given in and asked him about it, but I was feeling too hungry and my head throbbed. Even though I was being escorted in a police car to the juvie facility, I was eager to get there. At least, they'd give me something to eat. And I'd have a bed to sleep in. A real bed with a mattress and a blanket. Hadn't seen that in a while. If you don't mind, can I ask you a question? He said. I shrugged. I felt too lazy to speak. If you got a chance to go back in time and stop yourself from doing meth for the first time, would you do it? I pondered for a second before shaking my head. That's not how it works, old man, I said. I know you can't literally go back in time, but... No, I interrupted him, I'm talking about the stopping myself part. I could have stopped myself when I was doing drugs in the first place. If I was a different person now than I was back then, maybe I would have made myself take a different route. But I know I'm still the same. Nothing has changed. How can you say that? The cop asked. I smirked. This is the third time I'm in this seat with handcuffs on, going to the same place we are going now. Déjà vu doesn't even begin to cover this feeling. And what about when you get out? Will you be doing meth again? He asked. I shrugged, looking down at my hands again. This time my eyes lingered on the dark marks on my skin, the paleness of my complexion. I won't wait until I get out. There are ways to get a fix while you are inside. The cop went quiet again. That's not true, he said. I scoffed. The surprise in your voice makes you sound like a rookie, old man. Well, that's 'cause I'm just a volunteer, he said. I nodded. That made a lot more sense now. You are just messing with me, aren't you? There's no way you can get a hold of meth inside the juvie. I gave a sardonic grin in the mirror. Believe someone who has taken this ride 3 times, old man. It's totally possible to get meth in juvie if you do the right things for the right people. And how does that make you feel? He said, the distaste in his voice a lot more obvious now. Alive, I said. Or it feels like a more comfortable death, at least. We arrived at another red light. He killed the engine again. Don't you regret it? Don't you regret any of it? It's slowly killing you. Are you completely okay with that? I leaned against the window again. Of course not, I said, but I'm not at a point where I can reverse any of it. The car started moving when the lights turned green again. You're wrong, he said. You still have time to change this. Beat it, old man. I'm done for. I'll need a shiny new body to change any of this. The one I'm in right now is too reliant on bad things for sustenance. I looked at him from the corner of my eye. Can you get me a new body? He remained quiet for some time. Then he said, "What about rehab?" I clicked my tongue. "Been there, done that, officer. Doesn't work. I've relapsed twice after rehab." There was a long moment of silence before the man said, "If you keep thinking like that, you'll never get better. I'm asking again, if you were given a second chance, would you just turn it down?" I told you, old man. The only second chance worth taking for me is when I'll have a new body. How am I supposed to get myself a new? Crash. I never got a chance to finish that sentence. The car window had blown up in my face when another car had run into ours at full speed. I heard the scream of bending metal and screeching tires. There was a burst of pain before I went numb. I imagine that's what being struck by lightning feels like. There's a blast and then there's nothing. Oblivion. With my last bit of strength, I dragged myself out of the broken door and tumbled onto the tarmac. I watched the world fading away as I struggled to keep my eyes open. My breath was filled with the smell of blood before even my breath turned to nothing. Then my heartbeat was fading along with my vision. Then came the darkness. "Miss Elsa, open the door. We need to leave." I groaned and shielded my face from the light. The knocking at the door grew more urgent, the voice more frantic. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. My head throbbed like it did after a heavy night at a rave. And a weird sensation was crawling up on my arms. I finally opened my eyes and looked at the room I was in. It wasn't like any room I'd been in before. The walls were just panels of wood, covered in hand-woven tapestries, mirrors, and pages filled with barely legible notes. Something told me the writing was mine, even though I couldn't remember picking up a quill the entire week. I paused. Why did I think of a quill instead of a pen? As I tried to think, my head throbbed harder. I could feel memories swirling up there like half-remembered dreams from a different world. All I could tell was I couldn't make much sense of them. Then I caught a glimpse of myself in one of the many mirrors on the wall. My eyes were a bright blue, my hair a luscious brown, and my skin looked a lot healthier than I remembered. I looked at my teeth, perfect, pearly whites studded in soft pink gums. I stopped breathing for a second. I am pretty? Next thing I knew, I was screaming at the top of my lungs. "Miss Elsa!" The voice outside yelled and something slammed heavily into the door, blowing the entire thing off its hinges. A girl rushed inside. "Are you okay, Miss Elsa?" she said, pushing her round-rimmed glasses up on her freckled nose. She had green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a tight bun. The sleeves of her plain white shirt were rolled up and a small black doll dangled by her hip, bouncing against the pleats of her long brown skirt. I'm okay, I just saw a rat," I said in a hurried voice. The girl named Lillian cocked her head. I don't know how I knew her name. Even though I had a feeling I was seeing her for the first time, I felt like I still knew her. "You are never afraid of rats, Miss Elsa," she said. "I was today," I said. "It startled me, Lillian." "Why are you calling me Lillian?" "You mostly call me Lily." She frowned. "I'm not in my right mind right now," I said, trying to give a casual shrug. My head was still spinning. "You are hardly ever in your wrong mind, Miss Elsa." "I am today, Lily. I'm not feeling too well." I waved my hands, trying to make myself look dismissive. I really was a bundle of nerves, actually. "Is it because of the Inquisition?" she said. "Inquisition?" I frowned. Then I quickly recovered. "Yes, the Inquisition." "Right, they are coming here, aren't they?" "Right, we need to prepare." "Right, I'll get right to it." I rushed over to my desk, pretending to clean up the mess of papers on the desk. "Miss Elsa, all your bags are over there." Lily pointed at the 2 suitcases sitting atop a chair in the corner. A broom stood leaning by the wall behind it. I felt like an idiot. I was sure Lily thought the same. "Why are you acting like this all of a sudden?" she said, cocking her head again. Feeling too embarrassed at my clumsiness, I quickly herded her out of the room and hauled the broken door off the floor and put it back into the frame. It was less of a door now and more of a loose curtain that could collapse at any given moment. But I needed whatever privacy I could get right now. "I'll be with you, Lily," I said. "I just need a moment." The girl outside was quiet for a moment and then she said, "So, are you coming out now?" I groaned. "I need several moments, Lily." I said, "I'll be with you." "Okay, but do make haste, Miss Elsa. We need to get going." Yeah, I get it." I rolled my eyes. "I'm going to go and check on Madame Smokewell," she said. There was a sound of footsteps moving away from my room and then there was silence. I stepped towards the wall and leaned against it. I got a weird feeling as I moved around. It was a foreign feeling of otherness that's similar to wearing someone else's clothes. I looked down at myself. I was lithe and a foot taller than I remembered being. My arms were slender and my legs were slim and I could feel a strength I had never felt before. I didn't feel like I could knock down a tree with a single kick. But I certainly felt stronger than I used to when my limbs were slender, pale, and covered in marks. I also didn't sweat excessively, nor did I feel the need to keep picking at my own skin. But the most pleasant sensation of all was the feeling of content. There wasn't a feeling of emptiness constantly gnawing at me from the inside. I didn't feel any compulsion to consume something that made my head lighter and turned my body into smoke. I simply felt alive. I said the word aloud and it sounded like magic. My name was Elsa Grimley and I was a witch. The information seemed to surface as the fog in my head cleared up. Then I remembered what had happened last night. I had been in a car. A police car, on my way to the juvie. I was talking to the guy who was driving. I couldn't remember much of our conversation. The only detail that remained distinct in my memory was the thing he said about a second chance. The question he had asked me. That brought another question to my mind. How did I even get here? And in this body? I pondered aloud. I couldn't think of any answer that science could answer. But another answer reared its head in my mind. The liberation ritual. It seemed like a part of my memory, or more like it was a part of the real Elsa's memories. I looked down at my hands. Numerous flecks of red caked my palm. It was dried blood, but it was peculiar since I didn't have any wounds on my skin. When I washed off the coagulated blood, I saw a marking on my palm, a 5-headed star with an eye at the center. The word liberation ritual came to my mind again, but I couldn't connect any dots. It was still just a word that I knew, but it meant nothing. What I did know was that it probably had something to do with how I got here. I filed the thoughts away for the moment and decided to step outside. Lillian and Miss Smokewell were probably waiting for me. I donned my long pointed cap and hurried to gather my bags when I heard something. Lillian was screaming. I shoved the broken door aside and rushed out into the hallway. My feet thumped against the carpeted floor while Lily's screams echoed across the wooden walls of the house. I found her in the room adjacent to the kitchen. Her face was pale, eyes wide, and her hand covered her mouth. In the dead silence of the room, I could almost hear her racing heart. My heavy breathing from the running sounded like a loud gust of wind. "Are you all right?" I asked. She didn't answer. I followed Lily's line of sight. An old woman was slumped in a chair by the desk on the right. Her head hung to the side, her eyes were closed, and her mouth was half open. She wore a deep purple dress and a gray cardigan that looked immaculate. And a pristine ivory tobacco pipe lay on her lap. But neither her sense of fashion nor her ivory pipe seemed to matter when we looked at the large slit on her frail wrist and the puddle of blood that had formed on the ground. This was Madame Alana Smokewell. And she was very much dead. I had memories of witnessing some messed up things in my previous life, but I barely had any reaction to it. I had ways of numbing myself to such things. But now that I was Elsa, I noticed that everything I saw and heard and felt had an amplified feel to it. So when I saw a bleeding corpse, I had to hold back a scream myself. It took a minute or two for my racing heart to calm down. I poked Lily out of her catatonia. She blinked and looked at me and then back at the old lady. Her face contorted with grief and sadness as tears welled up in her eyes. I looked at her awkwardly and wondered if I should say something to her. I just gave her a gentle pat on the shoulder and moved towards the dead woman. I know I should have given Lily some better reassurance, but I couldn't come up with anything good enough. I held 2 fingers under Madame Smokewell's nostrils. She wasn't breathing. Yep, she really was dead. I heard Lily sniffle behind me. "Why did you have to do that?" she said. "It's okay, Lily. There's not much we can do about it now," I said quietly. "No, not that," she said, sounding a little frustrated. "You just checked for her breathing to make sure if she was dead. Why did you have to do that? Can't you see her halo has turned gray?" "Right," I thought as I looked down at the woman and saw the pale halo that hovered over her head. Old Elsa's memories told me that the halo was over everyone's head. It was green when you were alive and it turned to gray when you died. Apparently, witches could read people's halos to figure out other things about them. I bit the inside of my cheek and wondered how many more of these slip-ups I was going to make. At this rate, it wasn't going to take long for Lillian to figure out that I wasn't the Elsa she knew. There was a moment of awkward silence as I stood by Smokewell's corpse, too embarrassed to face Lily. Fortunately, my eyes happened on a sheet of paper on the desk. "Hey, this looks like a letter," I said, breathing an inward sigh of relief for finding something to change the topic. "Dear Elsa and Lillian, if you are reading this, then it means you have probably discovered my corpse by now. I don't have much else to say other than the fact that I'm tired. And I'm too old to keep running from the blasted Inquisition. Which reminds me, I'm already missing being able to fly the broom. But I wouldn't waste your time too much with the ramblings of an old woman. So, I'll keep this brief. I've put a hex on this house. It will activate when someone tries to force their entry, setting the intruder and the house aflame. It is important that my corpse remains inside the house for the hex to work. So leave me where you find me and escape before it's too late. Also, as soon as you exit the village, I want you to visit the Asmod's Nook in Orowan City. I left an important package with him that you need to pick up. It's very important. Do not forget it. With that said, it's time for me to slash my wrist now. You two should get going. Also, take the letter with you. Also take my opium pipe. It will make for a good memento. Good luck on your travels. Yours truly, Alana Smokewell. By the time I finished reading the letter aloud, Lillian's freckled face was red and tears had left wet trails on her cheeks. I could tell she was doing her best to not just completely break down and start bawling her eyes out. I sighed and pulled out my handkerchief from my vest and handed it to her. She nodded in thanks and dried her eyes. There was more awkward silence. I finally decided to open my mouth and say something. "Lily, we need to get going," she cut me off. She spoke in a tone that people used when they were trying to appear stronger than they felt. "The Inquisition will be here any moment now." She stepped up to Madame Smokewell and retrieved the ivory pipe that was on her lap. Then, without another word, she left the room to go and get her bags. I was about to follow her when I noticed something else about the Smokewell lady. There was a mark on her hand. It was similar to the 5-headed star on my palm. But instead of an eye at the center, hers had a chain. Fortunately, we left before the Inquisition could get to our house. Both of us had 2 suitcases each and our brooms were wrapped up in sheets and slung behind our backs. We also weren't wearing our pointy hats since it was too much of a dead giveaway. Instead, we put on cotton bonnets to shield our faces from the sun and walked with our heads down. This time I avoided asking a question about why we weren't using brooms to just fly off. There was probably a good reason to walk on the ground that I was already supposed to know since I was Lily's senior. So I just kept quiet and kept walking. I had a reputation to uphold after all. "Miss Elsa, are you all right?" Lily asked. "I am okay, I guess. I shrugged. After a short pause, I asked, "How are you feeling after seeing Madame Smokewell like that?" Lily didn't speak for a long time. And when she did, her face was taut, as if holding back what she really felt. "It's the worst thing that has happened this year," she said. "I understand," I said quietly. Lily looked at me, her eyes glinting. "You mean you agree with me?" The way she said it sounded quite eager. I was unsure what to make of that, so I just nodded and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't I?" "Madame Smokewell was our mentor," I said, straining to retrieve anything I could from old Elsa's memories. "We've been together for the past 5 years, and she has taught us so much." I looked up to her and admired her wisdom. "It's really heartbreaking what happened." Lily's eyes were wide behind her glasses. I thought I saw a deep sense of adoration in them. "You sound so passionate, Miss Elsa," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Is that surprising?" "In this case, yes." Lily nodded. "You and Madame Smokewell kept falling out so frequently. I rarely heard you speak so highly of her. Also, you are usually so stoic and determined. So it's a bit surprising to see you like this." "Oh, it's not I had said something out of character and I didn't have anything to say in response." "Great." I was still fumbling to say something when Lily put a hand on my arm. "It's okay, Miss Elsa," she said. "I'm glad you spoke your mind like you felt it. With Madame gone, it's just you and I on our own. It's only going to help us to be honest with each other." I held back a frown. I wondered how she would react if she found out that the one who had said all those things wasn't the real Elsa. We arrived at the neighboring city by the evening. It was a place named Orowan where the roads were made of red bricks. Gas lamps illuminated our way and steam-operated carriages rode the streets. Asmod's nook of greeting cards was a shady armpit of a building right next to a tall clock tower. 2 trash cans sat on either side of the nook's main entrance. Old Elsa's memories told me they weren't trash cans, but constructs that made everything look normal. I had to walk inside to understand what it really meant. At first glance, it didn't look like anything out of the ordinary. A counter on the right with a mechanical cash register on top. A line of shelves against the wall to the left. More than a dozen greeting card designs that were on display in the cases. A few handmade miniatures sat on a shelf opposite to the entrance. As I looked around, something fizzled in my vision. I focused on it a bit and saw what was under the normal facade. The cards on the shelves weren't greeting cards at all. They were just sheets of white paper with symbols painted in red. Even though I could see them, I couldn't exactly read them. But what struck me was how every symbol invoked a specific emotion in me. I guessed every symbol corresponded to the occasion it would be given on. I picked up a card with a symbol that gave a pleasant feeling and made me want to smile. This could have been a birthday or a wedding card. "I'm so sorry for what happened," a voice said. I almost jumped at the sudden sound. A short and stocky man stood by the shelf full of miniatures. He was completely bald and dressed in a black waistcoat, white shirt, and gray trousers. A small pouch was attached to his hip that held a few brushes, and his stubby fingers were stained with red ink. He shook his head with a solemn look of sadness. It was a mystery whether he had been there since we entered or had he just waddled out from behind the counter. "I'm so sorry," he said again. "It's okay, Mr. Asmod," Lily said, and then she did a double take. "Wait, are you talking about Madame Smokewell?" "Who else would I be talking about?" He frowned. "How did you know she passed away?" Lily asked. "She told me she was going to do it. That was about 2 days ago when she came to drop the package here." Asmod gave us an inquisitive glance. "You are here for the package, right?" Lily and I both nodded. "Follow me." Asmod opened a door behind him that hadn't been there before. I shook away the surprise and went in after Lily. Asmod led us into a dimly lit workshop. I saw more white cards with red symbols. These were hanging by many strings from the room. Lily and I felt an uneven swirl of emotions as we passed them by. From a closet in the corner, Asmod pulled out a small cage. Inside the cage was a black cat. Lily looked as confused as me. "That is the package that Madame Smokewell wanted us to pick up so urgently?" I said. "Yes, and she is quite hungry," Asmod said, and unlocked the cage. As soon as the door of the cage swung open, the feline dashed right at me, claws out, teeth bared, and her eyes were flashing red. Remember when I said that as Elsa, the way I reacted to everything had gotten more intense? Yeah, I wasn't kidding. When the black cat lunged at me, hissing and ready to claw, I lifted my leg and swept it in a lethal arch. My boot connected with the side of its torso, raising it off the ground and throwing it into the wall on the right. It went down with a loud mewling sound. Asmod's eyes went wide. Lillian gasped loudly. "Miss Elsa, what was that for?" She snapped at me. "Self-defense," I said, planting my foot back on the ground and standing straight again. Lillian rushed forward, lifted the cat into her arms, and stroked her sore torso soothingly. "It's just a cat," grimly, Asmod said. "She wasn't going to hurt you or anything." "Weren't you paying attention?" "When it came at me, I saw blood in that thing's eye," I said. "She's just a poor, gentle creature," Lily said, walking towards me with the cat in her arms. "Asmod said she was hungry. She probably wanted you to comfort her. Just look at that face." She held the cat in front of me, stretching out her arms. The red eyes glared at me fiercely, and the cat was baring her teeth again. "Hiss." I pursed my lips. "Yes. Gentle and helpless indeed." Lily gave me a sour look. "Madame Smokewell wanted us to pick up this poor creature as soon as we left our village. She probably cared about her a lot and was worried that the poor thing would be orphaned once she killed herself. She wants us to take care of her, Miss Elsa. This is part of Madame Smokewell's legacy." I grimaced. "I think you are giving her a lot more backstory than she deserves." "What's a backstory?" Asmod asked. I rolled my eyes. "Never mind." "No," Lily said sternly. "You should apologize." "What?" I said. "To whom?" "To Garnet." Lily held up the cat again. I scoffed. "Garnet? Really, she has a name now?" Grimly, "You know Garnet doesn't deserve so much hate," Asmod said, "especially since the common folk already think of her kind as ill fortune." "Well, in this case, I side with common folk." I crossed my arms. "The common folk side with the Inquisition that wants to burn us. Would you still side with them?" Lily glared at me. "Okay, calm down. You are blowing this out of proportion," I said. "Then why don't you be the better person and just apologize?" Asmod said. "Even if you don't apologize, at least show that you mean no harm to her." Lily brought the cat closer to me. I frowned. "What do you want me to do?" "Rub her back," Lily said. I cringed, quite visibly. I don't remember myself ever being too keen on animals in my previous life. But when the hair on my arm stood on end, I could tell that old Elsa might have shared my sentiments too. I looked at Lily, then at Asmod. They both looked back at me, their faces obdurate. After a second, I rolled my eyes and raised my hand. I reluctantly reached for the cat's torso. Before my fingers even touched her fur, her paw went up in the air and came down on the back of my hand in a nasty swipe. I cried out in pain. "You piece of..." "See, was it so difficult?" Lily said. I gawked at her. The damn thing scratched me. I held up my hand with the 3 thin red lines, glowing against my skin. "Well, you kicked her first. She is going to be scared of you, of course. But at least you held yourself back this time," Asmod said. Lily nodded. "Yes, at least she knows that you mean no harm anymore." I groaned and decided to shut up and let the topic slowly die. It had already gone for longer than I liked. "You said she was hungry, right?" Lily looked at Asmod. Why don't we feed her something? The short, bald man nodded. Have you brought the letter Madam Smokewell left with you? I nodded and pulled out the letter from my vest. He took the piece of paper and pulled out the brush that was in the pouch on his hip. He made a few strokes with the red ink on the back of the letter, bold and elegant as calligraphy. Then the symbol he had painted began to glow, and then it disappeared. In its place, more writing appeared on the previously blank surface of the page. When Smokewell came to drop by the package, she wanted me to enchant this piece of paper for her, Asmod said, holding up the paper so we could see the back of the letter. I could tell it was written in Smokewell's pretty cursive writing. Sith bread recipe for the cat. Ingredients: 1 piece of ghost sage tree root, 2 cups of water from the moon pond, 3 eggs from a one-eyed rooster, 1 cup of milk from a 3-legged goat, 300 grams of refined flour, crushed bones of a young vulture for seasoning. The ingredients were enough to give me a pause. I looked at Lily and felt reassured to see that she found this weird too. I don't think bread is good for a cat's health, she said, tapping her chin with a finger. My jaw went slack. That's the thing that worries you? Yes, mostly it's advised to not feed bread to a cat. Something like meat or milk would be good. Lily nodded. But the recipe was left by Madam Smokewell, Asmod said. She would have given this a better thought, don't you think? Am I the only one who thinks that this bread seems less like bread and more like an offering to a demon? I said. No, Miss Elsa. Demons only accept apples as payment and offerings, Lily said. Did you forget that time when you and Madam Smokewell helped catch the demon burglar who had stolen all the apples from the demon realm? I swear, I was about to yank my hair out. You know what? Forget it. Let's just make the damn bread and be done with it. We'll have to get these ingredients first, Asmod said, squinting at the page. Where are we supposed to get the 3-legged goat, one-eyed rooster, and vulture bone dust? I said. I know a place where to get those and the refined flour, Asmod said. I'll place an order. I'm more worried about the procedure of making the bread itself. It needs to be ready before midnight. I frowned again. This seemed even less like cat food now, but I kept quiet this time. I'd already used more than enough energy on arguing about cat food. We'll get the tree root and the water then. Lily shrugged. It's only 8 o'clock. The cat that was still in her arms nuzzled her chin, purring softly, as if happy at the mention of food. Sounds like a plan, I said. So where do we get those other ingredients now? Lily and I stepped out into the streets to get the moon pond water and ghost sage root. Asmod was going to buy all the weird animal products and use the flour he had in his own pantry. He gave us the address to the people who could sell us the root and water. But I won't be able to pay for this too, he said. I gave him a gracious nod and said, You're already spending more than we would have expected. We won't trouble you more. No, it's not that I can't buy it for you. He hesitated before saying, It's just that the folks that sell those things ask for something more than money. That had me intrigued. Like what? Souls. They were the Malcolm family. Asmod told us they were exiles from somewhere and they'd brought an impossible amount of wealth along with them. That wealth had only grown bigger when they invested in businesses here. And they mainly invested in people like Asmod, those who were capable of using some magic. But their real business was doing favors to those in need. The kind of favors that the government couldn't do, especially the things the government wouldn't do. Asmod drove us over to their mansion in his clunky little steam carriage and told us to wait while he talked to the guards at the big wrought iron gates at the front. Lily and I watched him from the backseat window. His chat with the guard went on for about 5 more minutes before they let us in. You have quite the reach, don't you? I said as his carriage rolled through the front entrance onto the gravel pathway ahead. I've traded with them before, he said. Don't tell me you've already given up your soul? He snorted. God, no. I'm not stupid. One other thing that the Malcolms trade with are favors. You go and ask them for something. If you don't want to part with your soul, you can say that you owe them a job. Then they'll call you up when they need. You can't refuse them then. Sounds like a trap. Lily narrowed her eyes. What if they ask you to give up your soul then? You see, those are the terms of their contract, Asmod said. They can't make you give up your souls unless you agree to give it up yourself. If you agree to do a job for them, a job is all they'll ask you to do. So, you are saying we should tell them that we'll do a job for them? Lily asked. I mean, you can always part with your soul too. It's up to you. He hit the brakes on the carriage as we arrived at the massive porch at the front. I think we'll keep our souls for now. Right, Lily? I nudged her. The girl nodded in a heartbeat. Asmod shrugged. I mean, that deal has its benefits too. But as I said, it's your soul. The tall front door of the mansion opened. Two muscular women walked down the porch steps and opened the carriage doors for us. They led us up to the door and were about to pat us down to see if we were hiding any weapons. Before they could put their hands on us, I pulled Asmod and Lillian aside. I just want to make sure we are all on the same page, I whispered to them. We are here to get ingredients for cat food. Frickin' cat food? Yes, Lily and Asmod said in unison. Their faces were completely serious. For a second I was terrified. Guys, I said gravely, are we seriously ready to get involved with some super mobster family just for some cat food? Yes. It was the same unified response, same serious looks. I groaned and leaned back. Let's just get this over with then. I walked up to the woman who was waiting to whisk us. The living room we entered was big enough to park 2 limousines. They'd made us take off our shoes so I could feel just how soft the shag carpet was. A tall marble fountain was at the center of the room. A circular couch was arranged around it. They asked us to sit down and wait for the twins, Anissa and Roderick Malcolm. When the two arrived, I couldn't help myself from gaping at them. Both of them had shiny jet black hair, smooth brown skin, and identical gray eyes with flecks of gold in them. And both of them were floating in the air. At first I was stumped. Then my vision fizzled again and I saw their white wings. And their halos weren't green but golden. I remembered Asmod telling us on the way that the twins were exiles. I wondered if they were some kind of fallen angels. I was certainly curious, but not stupid enough to ask them outright. Josie told us that Asmod was here, Anissa said with a gentle smile. So we didn't bother to get properly dressed. Then she giggled. Nor walk on the ground. I frowned. Anissa was wearing a flowing black dress of the finest silk I'd ever seen. Roderick was in a satin shirt and tuxedo trousers. This didn't qualify as properly dressed in their lexicon? I was certainly a lot more stumped now. So Asmod, Roderick said as he landed on the carpet in front of the short man. What brings you here today? Anissa offered Asmod her hand. He touched the ring on her finger with his forehead. I have friends with me who seek your help. I hope my lord and lady don't mind? Asmod asked. The twins gave another gentle smile. Asmod introduced the both of us and told the twins about our reason for visiting. Anissa said, appraising Lily and I with inquisitive eyes, Ghost Sage and the water from the moon pond. What do you need those for? Even though her voice was gentle, the question still held authority. We have to prepare food for our cat. Those are one of the ingredients, I said before I could stop myself. I regretted it as soon as I heard how stupid it sounded. Roderick gave a chuckle that sounded like rain on a summer morning. Quite the cat it must be, and quite the food you are making, he said. But, you're in luck since we actually own a farm full of ghost sage trees and we have 5 moon ponds in our name. We'll be happy to share, but there's going to be a price. Anissa said. Lily nodded. Mr. Asmod told us. We are ready to pay back by doing a job for you. Roderick smiled. Wonderful. He clapped his hands twice and two rather ancient-looking scrolls appeared out of thin air. Our contracts. The writing on them was written in bold silver letters. Do make sure you read everything before signing, Anissa said with a small smile. Do we sign it in blood? I said as Lily, and I reached out to pull the contract closer to read it better. It was only a half joke, considering the situation I was in. The twins laughed at my question. You are a charming one, Miss Elsa, Roderick said. We don't mind blood, but for now you can use a simple quill and ink, Anissa said. I was about to say something to the twins when I heard Lily hiss next to me. I looked at her to see that she had her finger in her mouth. And there was a drop of blood on the contract in front of her. My eyes went wide. Then something stung my finger. A drop of blood fell onto the page on the sign here section.